Welcome back to Big Mouth. I'm Nick Meanus, just in case you need to track me down for sleeping with your wife or your girlfriend. I'm not joking. Yes, welcome to Monday's edition of the dceu Daily. Remember, you can tag me and follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad. Why Bruce Timm should be president of DC Films. This is an article I found on Screen Rant by someone called Lucas. I'm not going to attempt to murder his surname. Batman Beyond creator believes show is ready made for live action remake. I'm going to read this and then I'm going to talk about Bruce Timm a little bit because the man's a pioneer. He is the Kevin Feige of DC. If you look at what he's done in, the shared universe for the animated DC characters, and I've spoken about this on this channel before. Bruce Timm, creator of the Batman Beyond cartoon, thinks the concept would make for a good live-action movie, if a little on the expensive side. The creator of Batman Beyond believes the show would make a great live-action movie. The successor to Batman, the animated series, hit HBO Max recently, launching the story of Terry McGinnis back into the lexicon of DC properties, with Michael Keaton returning to the DCEU as Batman for The Flash. The potential for the live-action adaptation of Batman Beyond has never been higher. Set in Neo Gotham in 2013, Batman Beyond follows a teenager named Terry McGinnis who stumbles across the Batcave and is given the mantle of the Dark Knight by an old and, I'm not going to read that word, an old Bruce Wayne. The series was initially scoffed at in concept but proved itself by exploring darker and more mature themes than its predecessor. The recent shake-up at DC and the recasting of Michael Keaton as Batman has left a particularly Terry-shaped hole open for a Batman Beyond film. In a recent interview with Sci-Fi, Batman Beyond creator Bruce Timm shared his thoughts on the brewing idea for a live-action version in the DCEU, with Keaton returning as an older Bruce Wayne. It will be easy for him to slide into a mentor role. Timm acknowledged this, saying, "Could Batman Beyond work in live action? Sure, of course it could. I think it's ready-made for it. I don't think it would be a little on the higher-end production value-wise because it would not be a cheap movie to make because it's set in the future. But there's definitely some cinematic possibilities there for sure. Honestly, I think the idea of Michael Keaton doing it is cool. Honestly, he looks a little too good," Timm said. "I know he's probably in his mid-60s now, but he looks pretty damn good for being over 60. I like my old Bruce Wayne to be like really old, but who knows? It could certainly still work. He looks like he could kick most guys' asses." As of now, any live-action plans for a Batman Beyond movie are purely speculation. The DCEU is a bit of a mess, at least as far as continuity is concerned. No, the DCEU is not a bit of a mess. Why? I don't get it, is concerned. But the catalyst was the rumour that Keaton would be the main Batman going forward. Things are more complicated than that, and Keaton is actually only officially signed on for one movie. There's also the Batman starring Robert Pattinson. Where are we? Which is not part of the DCEU, at least for now. With this many Bat people to juggle, DC may not have any interest in adding another, though the Flash's likely inclusion of a multiverse does make it easy to sneak in a Batman Beyond Elseworld movie. The multiverse strategy gives you endless potential. What are you talking about? The continuity in the DCEU is fine. It's not as shared and interconnected as the MCU, which it should be, and any franchise should be, but it's not a mess as far as I'm concerned. Neo Gotham was bizarre and future punk, and McGinnis was a unique character who was easy to relate to, especially as the first ever teenage Batman. By the end of the series' 52-episode run, Batman Beyond had developed a whole new world, a charming rogues gallery, and also the Joker again, and a distinct set of themes from any other iteration of the Dark Knight. Bruce Timm is right that it wouldn't be cheap to create a live-action futuristic Neo Gotham that does justice to the animated version, but it's not like Warner Brothers can't afford it. A live-action Batman Beyond movie would be exactly the kind of Elseworld Janir Bender that makes DC at any time more exciting than Marvel, and fans would finally get to see what weirdly smooth and form-fitting all-black batsuit is actually supposed to be made of. I tell you what, I love this idea, and I want to talk about Bruce Timm. Mostly, this is why this article attracted me. But listen, imagine a futuristic world created in an HBO Max exclusive series or a live-action movie, a trilogy, or more than that. It would be amazing. Batman Beyond is crying out for a live-action treatment, and I'd love to see it. And I think maybe with Keaton returning, this is their plan. So don't write it off. Now, let's talk about, what's his bloody name? How do I forget names? This is one of my heroes of DC. Jesus, where are we? Bruce Timm. Do you see how crap I am with names? I love this guy and I forgot his name. Anyway, let's talk about Bruce Timm. Ray Fisher is putting Walter Hamada's position under more and more pressure as DC Films president of the DCEU. So I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if Ray has evidence to expose that Walter Hamada actually tried to interfere with the Justice League on-set problems and investigation. I don't know. I believe Ray. So it's just about, has he got evidence to put in the public arena? If that was to happen and he was to go, I would guess Peter Safran, which is literally kind of the co-lieutenant of DC Films right now, right under Walter Hamada, would take over if he wanted to. Now, Peter Safran has his own production company that's involved with making certain DC movies now. I like Peter Safran because when I see him talking on my bonus features, because I've never seen Walter Hamada talk about DC. And that's the problem to me. One of the great things about Feige is he's out in the public arena talking passionately. And you can tell the guy actually has a plan. And the thing is with the public, unless they can see someone publicly talking, then it's a bit problematic, because if Walter Hamada was out in the public arena talking, now we saw him on DC Fandom and he spoke really well, but we need to see more of that. Now, I don't know what the future holds for Walter Hamada, but if he was to resign, and I think they're not going to sack him, that's the only way he's going to leave. If he steps down, if Ray Fisher keeps on plugging the pressure, and he said nothing yesterday, but Ray's always said, just because I go quiet doesn't mean it's the end of the story. So Ray's not going anywhere. It's as simple as that. So if Walter Hamada was to decide to resign, and I think that is a distinct possibility, I think Bruce Timm would be absolutely perfect as the DC Films president. Why? Let me explain to you, if you don't understand who Bruce Timm is. Bruce Timm has created a DC animated extended universe. It's exactly what Kevin Feige's done at the MCU, but in animation. There's continuity, it works, it's brilliant. It's probably, along with Smallville, probably the best DC universe ever created for television or film. It's absolutely fantastic. He knows DC. He knows these DC characters. I do not understand why this guy wasn't heading DC Films from the very beginning, from Man of Steel. So even though Man of Steel is not everyone's cup of tea or BVS, he could have created a universe that had a bit of everything, like they're trying to do now. And so I think the next DC Films president should definitely, I tell you what, it should be Bruce Timm. I don't know if some of you wouldn't agree with that. Comment down below and let me know. But Bruce Timm knows everything he needs to know to run a franchise, because he already runs the animated universe. So people say, yeah, but that's animated. It doesn't matter what form the films and the TV shows are done in. The guy has set up storylines. He's made it successful. I don't hear people constantly bitching about the DC animated universe because it's awesome and it's epic. So I think Bruce Timm should have been the DC Films president from the very beginning, and I think he should still be in the role. Now, will that ever happen? Probably not. But if Hamada does go, I would like to see it. I would definitely do petitions and talk about that happening here on my channel, because I think it would be absolutely the right move. Let me know what you think, though. You should be ashamed of yourself. Yes, we had a very, very successful Release the Haircut event on Twitter yesterday. I retweeted as many tweets as I could on it. It was a very successful hashtag. It was trending with 100k tweets. That's amazing. So well done to the organisers. I think you're absolutely fantastic. Now, I feel bad because when Zack Snyder's Justice League was announced, I was saying, well, it's a foregone conclusion the haircut's coming, and we would want to see the haircut before Zack Snyder's Justice League. That hasn't happened, and I'm astonished about that because David Ayer deserves his justice as Zack Snyder does. And so why did David Ayer release that footage? First of all, it was to thank the fans for fighting for him, fighting for his vision of Suicide Squad. But secondly, remember what the Joker says in this first scene piece of footage. You should be ashamed of yourself. Or is it you should be ashamed of yourselves? Whatever. He's looking at Warner Brothers. He's sending a message to Warner Brothers Pictures and the people who betrayed Zack and his vision. And it is a betrayal. As much as I stand and I defend Warner Brothers, I can't defend the old regime about what happened here. You know, Zack Snyder's vision wasn't working for them. It wasn't bringing enough bacon in. There was too much toxicity and divisiveness about it. Then you let the guy finish his vision along with David Ayer's movie. Then you move him on. But you don't do what they did. And we've spoken about this so many times on this channel. So David Ayer, through that video, that 2-second video, is sending a message to Warner Brothers Pictures. Now let's have a look what Cooper Hood from Screen Rant has to say about it. Suicide Squad Jared Leto's burned Joker featured in new haircut scene. Suicide Squad director David Ayer shares new footage from the haircut featuring Jared Leto's Joker and his burned face from the original ending. Suicide Squad director David Ayer shares never before seen footage featuring Jared Leto's burned Joker from the haircut. The Suicide Squad franchise is going in a very different direction after the 2016 original film's divisive response. And even though there is excitement for what James Gunn will do next in the Suicide Squad, there certainly is from me, there are still plenty of DC fans interested in this first Suicide Squad. The movie was a box office success for Warner Brothers and DC Films, but several elements split audiences, arguably none more so than Jared Leto's Joker. The polarising opinions on his Joker started right when the first image of Leto in the unique design was released. Suicide Squad's release left audience members with different opinions on if he fit the role or not. Still, some feel Leto wasn't allowed to really develop his Joker characterisation. This is particularly because WB and DC ordered major reshoots to Suicide Squad that cut significant aspects of his story and changed others. And these changes resulted in plenty of Joker footage from Suicide Squad being left on the cutting room floor. Some of the cut Joker footage from Suicide Squad has now been released by director David Ayer. The footage comes from David Ayer's Instagram story and shows Joker in the film's original third act. Leto's Joker is shown saying, "You should be ashamed of yourself." The burns on his face are from the helicopter crash, and he is likely speaking to Task Force X here. The release of this new Suicide Squad footage could see more DC fans get behind the release of the haircut movement, after fans showed their interest in getting Zack Snyder's original cut of Justice League completed and released. Another campaign began to restore Ayer's cut of Suicide Squad. Ayer has confirmed that his original cut is almost already finished, so he only needs approval from the studio to finish it at this point. There has been speculation that the Ayer cut will be released on HBO Max at some point, just like the Snyder cut, but that has not been confirmed. Regardless of if WB and DC are interested in the Ayer cut right now, they could be waiting to see how the Snyder cut performed before making an announcement. Zack Snyder's reshoot for Justice League surprisingly included the return of Jared Leto as Joker. This could allow Justice League to reinvigorate interest in Leto's Joker and even tease what happened to him in the original Suicide Squad cut. If the Snyder cut is a hit on HBO Max and viewers respond positively to the new Joker scene, then it might be more likely that the Ayer cut is completed. This would deliver more new scenes with Jared Leto's Joker and provide the context behind this footage. But until that happens, the future of the Ayer cut and Jared Leto's Joker remains unclear. Yeah, a great article there, and I concur with that. Look, this film should be released. You know, what they did to David Ayer, what they did to Zack Snyder and his vision, which David Ayer's film was part of that, was an absolute disgrace. I can't defend any studio for doing that. We know everything now. They handled things in the wrong way. And if they just allowed Zack to do his arc, to move on, we would have no Ray Fisher investigation. We would have no issues with Ray Fisher now. There would be no problems. And we will be in a new chapter of the DC Extended Universe now. And everything would have been all right. But no, we've got all this toxicity and negativity because of the way Warner Brothers Pictures conducted themselves. And that's a shame. Hopefully, moving forward, we can sort this stuff out. Because DC live action has so much potential. These are the best comic book characters ever created. And they deserve better. So something very curious happened over on HBO Max yesterday. They started promoting all the films that they're releasing on the platform and in theatres where open at the same time. And one of those films they showed a little clip of was James Gunn's The Suicide Squad. And this is by Saeed. Again, sorry Saeed, I am not going to attempt to murder your name. Suicide Squad 2 video showed four main characters together. New footage of Suicide Squad 2 from an HBO Max trailer teasing WB's upcoming 2021 movies features four main characters of Task Force X teaming up. HBO Max has released a new video previewing its upcoming 2021 movie slate, and one of its scenes shows four of the main characters from the Suicide Squad together, serving as a soft reboot and a standalone sequel to David Ayer's critically panned 2016 Suicide Squad movie. Right, this is not a soft reboot. This is actually continuing because we've got we've got about three characters from the original movie coming back, played by the same actors. So how can it be a reboot? Maybe a relaunch. Pick your words better, Saeed. Suicide Squad movie, the new film, is written and directed by James Gunn, who joined the DC Extended Universe after being briefly fired from the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Gunn has retooled the Suicide Squad franchise with a bigger cast that includes both new and returning characters. Gunn's film will also be R-rated and is expected to be more action-packed as it involves Task Force X's deployment to South America for a high-stakes mission. Initially, the Suicide Squad was primed to make a full-fledged theatrical debut in August 2021, but then in March 2020, an outbreak of the coronavirus in the US took Hollywood by storm, forcing the closures of cinemas across the country. While many theatres responded in late August and early September, reopened, the COVID-19 pandemic showed no signs of containment. This moved Warner Brothers to alter its release plans, with the studio giant deciding to release all 17 of its 2021 movies on HBO Max on the same day as their theatrical premieres. The Suicide Squad is one of the studio's major tentpoles, along with The Matrix 4 and Dune, that has been affected by this new model. Though earlier it was reported that James Gunn is seemingly dissatisfied with the move, Warner Brothers is sticking to its new distribution plan, as it has just unveiled a sneak preview confirming the same. I wouldn't be surprised if James Gunn isn't happy about breaking the release window, but at least he's been professional enough to keep his mouth shut publicly, which is what people should do in this game. HBO Max shared a trailer teasing many of Warner Brothers movies that will arrive on the streamer alongside their theatrical debuts. One of the scenes in the video includes a shot from the Suicide Squad around the 0.14 mark that shows four members of Task Force X: Polka Dot Man, David Mastian, is that how you say his name? Peacemaker, John Cena, Bloodsport, Idris Elba, and Ratcatcher 2, Daniela Melchior. The context of the scene isn't clear, as the only other clip from the movie is previously seen footage of Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn shooting guns alone in a room. With the video giving a notable mention to certain villains, it appears that these characters will have a larger part to play in the Suicide Squad. Cena's Peacemaker is already significant to the franchise, as he is getting his own spin-off show on HBO Max. And the backstory of Melchior's gender-bent superhero and Polka Dot Man's enigmatic powers are also expected to serve as significant plot lines in the movie. It is currently unclear if the 4 characters shown together in the video have an agenda of their own, and if they are only using their participation in Task Force X to accomplish their own ulterior motives. But if they all successfully make it out the movie alive, it will be a special treat to DC fans who Gunn has scared by suggesting that no character is safe, and we discussed what that means for Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn. She could be one of them killed off. But anyone who's killed off in this film may not be killed off forever because of Flashpoint. So always remember that as well. It's a bit like Infinity War and then going to Endgame. Always the potential of bringing people back with those concepts. It also appears Bloodsport, Peacemaker, Ratcatcher 2 and Polka Dot Man will stick together during most of the Suicide Squad. In fact, their team-up has been teased in the previous first look images and the set photos that have occasionally surfaced. Bloodsport, Peacemaker, Ratcatcher 2 and Polka Dot Man have an early synchronized unison in every scene that has featured them together. Bloodsport and Peacemaker, of course, appear to carry out the heavier tasks in all the scenes, while Ratcatcher 2 probingly assesses the environment for danger, and Polka Dot Man puts his unconventional antics to use to imbue humour into the situation. Hopefully fans will be able to savour this camaraderie between the characters once the Suicide Squad premieres on August the 6th, 2021. So that's very exciting, isn't it? So we've seen HBO Max and Warner Media plug their release window with all these films. They've even brought forward Kong vs. Godzilla to March the 26th. Now, we discussed this a little bit on yesterday's DCEU Daily, because this is curious, because we heard rumours, and Zack's heavily hinted this, that Zack Snyder's Justice League was supposed to release in March. Now, just because Godzilla vs. Kong is out on March the 26th, it doesn't mean that Zack Snyder's Justice League can't be released in early March. So I would predict maybe late February, early March for Zack Snyder's Justice League. I wouldn't be thinking about April right now, just because Kong vs. Godzilla is coming out on March the 26th. I mean, it would be a great coup for HBO Max to have 2 big movies or 2 big pieces of content being released on the same month. So, I know many fans are really worried about the situation with Zack Snyder's Justice League. Ever since Ray Fisher's been talking about Walter Hamada, Zack's become very quiet, which is concerning. We did have these concerns last year, and when the trailer for Zack Snyder's Justice League was taken down, but that was for copyright reasons over the song. So there's no such issue now, so we'll see. They're not really promoting Zack Snyder's Justice League at this moment in time that much, but saying that, we have seen big posters and big borders outside. And so they have started promoting it, and Zack is going to do another trailer. He is doing another trailer, which he has teased, I think, maybe for this month or next month. So they have promoted the movie. Let's be fair. Now, I have said before, I'm concerned myself. Is Ray putting the release of Zack Snyder's Justice League at risk? Normally, I would say yes, but they've invested $70 million. They're going to release this film. Get excited. Everyone around the world who wants to see this film is going to be able to see this film. So I can give you my assurances that Zack Snyder's Justice League is still going ahead. So, Michael Pattinson has written a very interesting article here. Snyder's DCEU Batman struggled because he had no villain mirror. Shall I be honest with you? I don't think you can say that Batfleck has struggled. He's done one film. You know, the Justice League film, you just got to delete out of your mind. So I don't think he struggled. I think even people who hate Snyder and BVS still loved what Ben Affleck did as Batman and Bruce Wayne in BVS. So I don't think he struggled. But I think he does make a good point here about the villain thing. The DCEU Batman struggled because he had no evil counterpart to overcome. If he had been given an arch enemy, things could have been different. Batman was a major figure in the early days of the DCEU, but his lack of a villain mirror left him without a real purpose. Portrayed by Ben Affleck, Zack Snyder's Dark Knight battled the Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice before going on to team up with 5 of DC's most iconic heroes to take on the world-destroying Steppenwolf in Justice League. However, Affleck never really got the chance to deliver the definitive Batman performance in the DCEU that fans knew he was capable of, and that was down to this one fundamental flaw in the version of the character he was portraying. Considering the Caped Crusader is arguably the most popular comic book character of all time, it made total sense for Snyder to position him as a key player of the DCEU in the hero's first outing. But the one component he forgot to bring with him was the other side of that coin. Because the truth is, the Batman is all about balance. And in spite of his dark persona, he brings the light that notoriously grim Gotham City needs. And in order to successfully portray that on screen, that notorious darkness also needs to be personified. It's like what Heath Ledger's Joker meant when he told Batman that he completed him in The Dark Knight. Batman needs that evil reflection to contend with, and unfortunately the DCEU iteration was never given one. One film though, and he never got to do his own film, so maybe in the future that's what they were planning, I don't know. That's not to say that they didn't try to give him a worthy counterpart. In a way, that was the whole point of Batman v Superman. However, it ultimately didn't work because, again, the true reflection of Batman isn't an inspiring hero like Superman. I wouldn't say it didn't work. It worked for what Zack wanted to do. Inspiring a hero like Superman. It's an inherent evil. And that right there was why he really struggled by having the Caped Crusader oppose such an inspiring hero. The DCEU turned Batman into a villain, which only undercut his own character. But again, you misunderstand what Snyder was attempting to do. This is a story of basically an older man who's been through so much shit, and he's become cynical and angry, and you can call him a villain, you can call him what you want. But it was logical to tell this story for an older Batman. Now, I'm not sure if telling an older Batman story in that way worked for everyone, and I can see the flaws in it, but I think that Snyder set something up pretty cool. Yes, it's well documented how Affleck's Batman was supposed to have lost his way at some point, and that Superman would eventually help him see the light. But that didn't always come across. I think it did. And as the Kryptonian hero was the victim of Bruce's assault, it betrayed him as the true hero and Batman as his evil reflection. I don't agree. A far cry from what the film was trying to accomplish. No. I think it's all done very well, especially when we see his perspective of the Battle of Metropolis and he sees Superman and Zod fighting. To him, Superman's the danger. Superman's the villain. You see, it's all about perception. And sometimes people these days haven't got the intellect or the focus with a film to work out what's going on. Anyway, many have suggested that Affleck was capable of giving us the best live-action Batman of them all. Some argue that Affleck already has, by the way. But the truth is that he needed a more fully realised Batman for that. Not the dark shell fans saw in Batman v Superman. That was something that could have been achieved if he had been given a villain to battle. The most obvious choice would have been the Joker because audiences seen it work so well with previous interpretations. But as admirable as it was, Warner Brothers' desire to do something different this time around ended up producing something so extreme that it alienated long-time fans. There's no question. People were alienated. And this is why I spoke about WandaVision. I've seen the first 2 episodes of WandaVision, and I like it. I think it's unique. I think it's different. But they've earned the right at the MCU to do something unique and different. If you make WandaVision the first MCU piece of content, people are going to go apeshit, like they did with Man of Steel and BVS. You've got to earn the right to be unique. MOS and BVS are great movies. I loved them, but they were placed wrongly. You don't take risks like that at the beginning. You get people's confidence, then you take the gamble. That's just my opinion. Affleck's murderous Batman and Jared Leto's outlandish DCEU Joker being two clear examples of that. But bringing the two bizarre interpretations together could have been the solution of that problem. And that might be one of the reasons that Affleck's Batman felt most at home during his cameo in Suicide Squad when he briefly crossed paths with the Clown Prince of Crime. Gotham City needs the Batman because he restores the balance. He's the incorruptible symbol used to exorcise the corrupt villains produced by it. But as the DCEU version wasn't given that corruptness to cancel out, he became the corrupt equal of another hero instead. If he had been introduced in his own film first and given that villain mirror to overcome, the arc in Batman v Superman might have worked without it. However, Ben Affleck's DCEU Batman wasn't able to fulfill his potential. Well, we're going to find out because we're going to get more Batfleck in the Flashpoint movie. I don't know how big and prominent his role is going to be. We'll definitely see him at the beginning of the movie, probably at the end of the movie. I don't know if they're going to kill him off or wipe him off out of existence. I just don't know on what they're planning with Ben's Batman. But I don't agree with everything he's trying to say here, but he does make a good point. And it all basically it all goes back to the way they styled out the DCEU at the beginning. So they wanted to be unique. They wanted to be different. They wanted to tell different real-world stories. They wanted to put these characters in the real world. And some comic book fans just were triggered by that. And as I say, you've got to earn the right to be unique. You've got to earn the right to do something different. And they didn't. Even Smallville stayed light and fluffy like a teenage show in the first season, earned that right, earned the fans, and then got darker and darker as the seasons went on because they earned it. Now, what the DC Extended Universe attempted to do is say, right, this is our world, like it or lump it. If you don't, you're going to have to go. That's problematic when you need the consumer and you want butts on seats to make record-breaking box office. And I am not criticising the actual films because I love them, as you know, but I think the strategy certainly is flawed. I'm really enjoying reading all these Screen Rant DC-related articles to you. This is by Craig Elvey. Wonder Woman 1984, every plot hole created by Steve Trevor's return. This is one of the big things that people didn't like about the film, and I agree it's somewhat problematic, but it doesn't break the film for me. But I think she should have brought him back in a different way, just so she hasn't got all this hassle now. But she's done it, and she's standing by it. And look, you want Chris Pine back, however you bring him back. And he was great in the movie. Wonder Woman 1984 brings Chris Pine and Steve Trevor back from the dead, but his resurrection creates a whole bunch of plot holes and inconsistencies. Steve Trevor comes back from the afterlife in Wonder Woman 1984 and brings a whole heap of plot holes with him. Making his debut in the groundbreaking 2017 Wonder Woman movie, Steve Trevor turns Diana's world upside down after crashing on Themyscira and entreating his Amazonian savior to help fight bad guys in World War I. Certain that Ares must be responsible, Diana ventures beyond the magical veil, protecting her island for the very first time, and her evolution into Wonder Woman finally begins. Steve shows Diana what it means to be human and a little bit more besides, but saving the day comes at a cost of his own life. Diana remains in the human world as a part-time anthropologist, part-time vigilante, but never forgets her first love. Before his untimely demise, Steve longed for more with his mysterious Amazonian companion, and that wish comes true thanks to the Dreamstone in Wonder Woman 1984. Believing the wish-granting inscription to be mere fairy tale, Diana silently asks a stone for Steve Trevor, and the divine rock duly obliges. Diana and Steve spend most of Wonder Woman 1984 together before they once again are torn apart by the cruel hand of fate. Thanks to Wonder Woman 1984's marketing, fans knew Chris Pine would be reprising his DC role in advance, but few were prepared for just how baffling Steve's comeback would be. What initially appeared to be a run of the Mill resurrection has been widely criticised for some very strange creative choices. Here are the plot holes, inconsistencies and unlikely coincidences raised by Steve Trevor in Wonder Woman 1984. Probably the biggest plot hole of Wonder Woman 1984, if not then at least the most discussed, is Steve Trevor's personality being revived in another man's body. And this regrettable decision creates a catalogue of plot inconsistencies all of its own. First, there's the question why Steve doesn't simply come back in a brand new body, unless Diana specifically asked the Dreamstone to deliver her boyfriend's soul, but give him a makeover physically. Why isn't Steve renewed exactly as Diana remembers him? The relic is powerful enough to conjure wishes out of thin air, creating giant walls and multiplying nukes. A Chris Pine lookalike should be straightforward enough. Agreed. Secondly, there's the moral implications of Steve possessing another man, and he and Diana both act completely out of character in this regard. The Amazonian sleeps with Steve while his host is effectively unconscious and neither cares that they're putting this random civilian in danger with gunfights and car chases. Look, I thought about the latter myself. That guy's body could have been damaged and he could end up dead. So there is that as well. Officially credited as a handsome man, his apartment might be full of selfies, but Diana and Steve are taking him away from friends and family or potentially getting the guy fired for not turning up to work. This is very true. Finally, the body Steve finds himself inhabiting is a remarkably convenient choice. Out of everyone Diana Prince's boyfriend could have woken up inside, it's a guy who lives alone. He's local to Diana and is the same age and build as Steve in 1918. Secretly, we're just disappointed Steve wasn't resurrected inside an old lady. Oh, God, imagine that. But listen, I would like to interview Patty. I'd like to have an off-the-record discussion with Patty about this and why she did it this way. And I would love to ask her if she feels it was a mistake. So I'm not going to hang her to dry for this because at the end of the day, right, if someone I loved come back from the dead in somebody's body, I'm not really going to care about that body. It's not even going to be in my head. So I understand why they weren't so cautious. They probably didn't think about it. So the flaw can be explained that way. But I do agree with the author of this article. Definitely, they should have just brought Steve Trevor back the old-fashioned way. To celebrate his donation to the Smithsonian and to get his filthy hands on the Dreamstone, Maxwell Lord throws a lavish party, which Diana agrees to attend, only to investigate her museum's untrustworthy new investor. When Diana pulls up at the shindig, there's security on the door, valets opening doors, an impressive red carpet, the full works. At some point off screen, Steve, who's clearly breaching a very formal dress code here, strolls into the party without an invitation. Since he spent World War I bravely infiltrating enemy strongholds, gate crashing a party probably wasn't too difficult for Steve, exactly. But since his entry to the party isn't shown, the audience are left to wonder how he pulled it off. One of the problems with people watching films today, people overanalyzing films today, you know what, yesterday my sister mentioned one of my favourite films to me, Forever Young, starring Mel Gibson, a beautiful fucking sonnet of a film. I bought it off Prime Video because I couldn't get it for free. I sat there and I was in tears. A beautiful film. I'm sure there's flaws in that film, but you know, back in 1992, we didn't overanalyze our movies. We sat there, we went to the cinema, we bought the VHS or the DVD. We watched it, we enjoyed it, and we got on with our lives. Went out to the pub with our mates, discussed the film, and that was it. I think the sadness of these days when we talk about films is the magnifying glass we put to these films, and we tear films to pieces. Please, can I make a request? Please, can you not tear the films that I grew up with and I love to pieces? You've got enough shitty movies to tear to pieces that all it takes to make them is to press a few computers and put a bit of CGI on them. You can tear those movies to pieces, but not the movies I grew up with, because they were made by proper artists and talented people. Enough said. Just as the thrills of 1918 London leave Diana Prince agog in Wonder Woman, Steve is given a mouth-wide open tour of the 1980s in the sequel. The list of things that Steve is amazed or confused by in Wonder Woman 84 is a lengthy one and ranges from Pop-Tarts to exercise bikes by way of breakdancing. But there's a few things Steve should be at least a little familiar with. In one scene, Diana takes Steve on the subway, and he's visibly shocked by this new mode of transportation. While subway systems did exist in Steve's time, just about, his excitable reaction can be forgiven due to the faster speeds and modern designs of the 1980s. Exactly. But it is strange that Steve doesn't know how an escalator works. As Diana leads him down the train platform, Steve is falling over himself trying to understand these new frangled moving staircases and has to be shown the ropes by his partner. They may not have been common, but escalators were commercially used prior to Steve's death. Admittedly, they were wooden and extremely rare, but the idea of a mechanical set of stairs shouldn't cause such alarm to Steve in Wonder Woman 1984. Again, I want to talk about this. This guy was a spy. He barely had a life. He was infiltrating places. It's very acceptable that Patty thought this guy probably didn't come across them, And look, they were wooden ones. We're talking, that was 1918. Now we're in 84. I think it's understandable for these new metal stairs that go upwards for Steve to be a bit surprised about them. Again, the over-analysis causes problems and ruins the enjoyment of films for us. We're ruining it for ourselves. While ransacking Maxwell Lord's office, Diana and Steve discover their slippery target has already flown to Cairo, but Diana says they can't follow because Steve doesn't have a transport. The line implies that Steve lacks a passport because he legally died over 60 years ago. But what about the person whose body he's inhabiting? As long as Steve's host has a valid passport, and many Americans did in 84, then they should be fine to fly. After all, it's only Diana and the audience seeing the face of Chris Pine. There's a small possibility that Steve and Diana already searched for a passport in Handsome Man's apartment and came away empty-handed. But once again, this isn't confirmed, leaving viewers to fill the gaps with guesswork and assumption and detracting from the enjoyment of the story. You know why it's detracting from the enjoyment? Because you're overthinking it. You're looking for things to tear a movie apart about, and you're spoiling the film, my friends, for yourselves. Steve Trevor getting his head around the 1980s accounts for most of Wonder Woman 84's comedic beats, and as explained above, he's sometimes amazed at things he shouldn't be. But Steve is also uses language that's a few decades too late for something hailing from the 1910s. In one scene, Steve drops the word lame as a disparaging way of saying uncool. Although this slang term would have been popular in 1984, lame didn't fall into US vernacular until the 1950s, so it's not clear why Steve's throwing it around in conversation. Here, perhaps he watched TV, heard someone say lame, and borrowed the term in order to blend in better. If this were the case, however, Wonder Woman 84 surely would have squeezed out a gag by having him use such modern language incorrectly. Again, doesn't matter, overthinking things, you shouldn't even be talking about that. Steve is a crack pilot, this much we know, but his skills transcend the decades. In Wonder Woman 1984, unable to fly to Egypt as a passenger, Steve and Dinah hijack a fighter jet from the Smithsonian. Not only is the plane fully fueled upon arrival, but Steve is immediately able to adapt to the F-111 Aardvark, an aircraft introduced in the 60s. Steve's piloting experience would have undoubtedly given him an advantage flying a modern plane, but there's a significant leap in technology between the two eras that makes Steve Trevor's intuitive piloting extremely unlikely, stretching the audience's suspension of disbelief even further. Steve and Diana seemingly fly the F-111 from Washington to Cairo and back on a single tank. Again, over-analysis. The vehicular expertise of Steve Trevor isn't limited to the air either. When he and Dinah are chasing Maxwell Lord across the highways of Egypt, it's Steve doing the stunt driving. Cars were invented before World War I, and automobile advancement between the 1910s and 1980s was less drastic than for aviation, but it's still impressive how Steve can seamlessly adapt to a modern car. While this is a minor niggle, it serves to highlight a strength of the original Wonder Woman that's absent in the sequel throughout her time in the world of man. Diana always feels like the fish out of water. In Wonder Woman 84, however, Steve stops feeling like a man out of time very quickly. Listen, if I'm from 1918 and I see a car, I'm going to work the buttons down. I'm going to say, well, that's the gear. That's that. So it's not that abnormal for him to work out a car. And the same goes for the plane. It's differently designed, but he's still a trained pilot. He still knows where everything is and what the new substitutes are. Again, nitpicking. And it's frustrating. And it ruins the film for everyone. Watching Wonder Woman 1984, easy to forget that the man Diana is travelling with does not look like Chris Pine. Over the course of his misadventures while under Steve Trevor's control, Handsome Man steals a military plane, violates US airspace, causes an international incident, and assaults guards in the White House. Diana may be able to avoid detection by wearing a costume and knocking out cameras, but the man Steve's possessing isn't afforded that luxury. And it's a minor miracle that he hasn't been visited by the authorities before reuniting with Diana Prince in the snow. Since Maxwell Lord also manages to avoid the long arm of the law, Wonder Woman 1984's police officers were evidently having a well-earned break. Yeah, that's a fair flaw. That's the problematic issue with using the body thing and not just bringing Steve Trevor back. But that's the decision she took, unfortunately. I think she shouldn't have done it. She clearly wasn't I don't know. I just think she's probably obsessed with Quantum Leap and wanted to use that concept. She's just seemed she does like to use things she's obsessed with from the past, as we've seen with the Donna stuff she brought into Wonder Woman 84 as well. So a pretty good article, but it also shows how we ruin films and TV shows for ourselves these days. Everything is looked under a microscope. And for me, all you're really doing is ruining the entertainment experience for yourself. Wow, what a long video, 45 minutes already. But one more article, so bear with me, then you can go home for the day. Why the DCEU doesn't have sidekicks. The DCEU has featured a lot of prominent characters from DC lore, but it's refrained from including many of the franchise's iconic sidekicks. By Rick Stevenson. Rick, this is a great point, and I'll give you my opinion on it after I've read this. The DCEU has featured a lot of prominent characters from DC lore, but it's generally refrained from including some of the franchise's most iconic characters. The sidekicks characters like Robin, Batgirl, Kid Flash, Aqualad, and Supergirl are core parts of the comics universe and have made numerous appearances in films and shows, but they haven't been made a notable part of the DCEU as of yet. It's a major absent, but there's some pretty good reasons for it. The excuse I would use is that you would allow Zack to do his first arc, and after the Justice League movies, then you could introduce them. But it is a good point, and of course, he didn't really give us a Jimmy Olsen, because I think the guy in BVS isn't actually Jimmy Olsen. I just think it's a code name. Jimmy Olsen, I think, is a relevant character that should be used because he's us. He's that ordinary person who becomes friends with the greatest being in the world, right? That's a pretty exciting concept. In fairness, psychics haven't exactly been prominent in modern DC films, even before the DCEU began. 1997's Batman and Robin is one of the most universally panned superhero movies of all time, and it may have poisoned the waters a bit for the future live-action psychics to debut. The Christopher Nolan Batman trilogy refrained from including any of Bruce Wayne's many teammates, save for a brief Robin Easter egg at the end of the movie. Still, that doesn't mean that characters couldn't have been incorporated well into the DCEU. The franchise's sprawling, interconnected nature makes it ripe for minor characters and ensemble casts, so why haven't any of the classic DC sidekicks shown up? I think you can say there's a lack of world building with this element, because I think it's important that we incorporate these people. But why couldn't Ben Affleck's Batman, like in BVS, already have a sidekick? You know, if Dick Grayson's dead, why can't Jason Todd be there? You know, there's no excuse. He could be part of the story. He could have been a great part of the story, trying to fit in after Dick Grayson's death. You know, things like that. I mean, Ben Affleck's Batman doesn't even mention Dick Grayson's death. You see the suit, the ha-ha-ha thing on the suit, but it's not mentioned, and that's a shame. So I think this is a flaw in the DCEU, and I accept that. Zack Snyder is a big part of it. Snyder's dark, gritty tone, which has enshrouded the early entries of the DCEU, would have made child superheroes in bright costumes feel a bit out of place. So why couldn't they wear dark costumes? That's no excuse. To bright costumes feel a bit out of place. It also doesn't help that Snyder's stories were set after the death of Robin, easily the most famous of all the DC sidekicks, without the well-established dynamic of Batman and Robin. It would have been difficult to introduce lesser-known sidekicks to less popular heroes. Well, as I said, you could have still used Jason Todd. That's no excuse. Another reason for the DCEU's lack of supporting heroes is that the franchise's TV properties have made much better use of the characters. Shows like Supergirl and Titans have cast sidekicks in the leading roles, and the response from fans has generally been positive. TV has proven to be a successful medium for DC Universe sidekick stories, and there isn't much reason to force those same characters into the DCEU when they've already found such success elsewhere. I don't think they have to be there. I just think you could have had them there. You wouldn't have had to squeeze them in. Incorporating the supporting cast of characters from DC is important. Now, maybe Zack was going to do this, or someone else would have done this after Zack's arc was over, but this is not how Zack swings anyway. He doesn't care about things like that. He just cares about the story arc he's telling. Still, that doesn't mean the DCEU hasn't introduced its fair share of obscure characters. The Suicide Squad will add a number of new villains and anti-heroes to the franchise's already impressive cast. Black Adam will introduce members of the Justice Society of America, and there are even rumours of a Tim Burton Batman Beyond film with Michael Keaton. As long as DC's sidekicks are thriving elsewhere, the DCEU can continue to focus on core heroes and its growing ensemble. I would absolutely love a Tim Burton Batman Beyond film. We spoke about that at the beginning. I really do feel that one of the reasons Michael Keaton's contract hasn't been officially announced yet is that I think Burton is negotiating along with Michael Keaton for this Batman Beyond movie. I think it would be amazing. I think all the DC fans would swallow it up. There's no question about it. With Walter Hamada in charge now, they are looking to incorporate a more, accurate aesthetic for the DC Extended Universe. Accurate in the sense of the comic books, rather than going totally their own way. The MCU's success, one of the reasons for it is Feige knows the comics. Feige's a fan of the comics, all the comics, and he knows them. And he will adapt certain comics. Now, he hasn't been faithful to those adaptations, no. But he has been accurate to the core characters from those comics. And there's a bit of a difference there. Anyway, I want you to comment down below. I'm going to have a drink of water because I haven't stopped talking. I mean, literally, this has been a non-stop video. Even when I pause, I'm back within a second. So I've really enjoyed doing it. Comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow with even more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.